On today's episode of the show, really fortunate to be joined by another great defensive coordinator from the U Sport level. Coach Sheldon Gray is the defensive coordinator with the Regina Rams. He's here to talk to us a little bit today about what they do on the back end of their defense. Coach, thanks a lot for making the time. And if you want to just kind of give the viewers or listeners a little backstory on how you got to Regina and how your coaching career has kind of gotten you to where you're at now.
Yeah, for sure. It all started when I graduated high school. Went and played for the Rams as a junior program at the point. So that was their last year of junior football. So I played 1 year of that. At that point, we ended up winning the national championship as a junior, and we made that transition in the year '99, so 1999, to university. So at that point, it was either start going to school or stop playing football. So at that point, I knew that I wanted to coach. I already started coaching at the bantam level, like my first year out in '98. So I decided to get into education. It's something I always had a passion in, coaching and teaching. So ended up getting a teaching degree, and I coached high school throughout that at my old high school, Miller High School. So I coached there while I played for 5 years. And after that, it was getting a teaching job. So I ended up getting a teaching job at Miller, coincidentally enough. Coached there for 4 years. Went to another high school in Saskatchewan, a powerhouse, Levoldis. Multiple provincial champions there. Those guys really know how to do it well. And I learned under a great head coach, John Ford, there. And at that point, kind of realized what I wanted to do and kind of made a push to coach at the U Sport level after 13 years of coaching at high school and bantam, and had the opportunity with a transition at head coach with the U of R. Coach Gibson came in from the CFL, gave me an opportunity to coach the D-backs here. Spent a year doing that, and then when the transition came to a new head coach with Coach Bryce, he brought me on as the defensive coordinator, and kind of where I've been for the last 3 years, coordinating the defense here at the U of R.
It's awesome, and it's so we were kind of talking before about coaching in Canada, and it's so I think important for people to kind of recognize like, hey, there's opportunities out there, right? Like whether you're starting in high school or you were a player in university and you want to get back into the game, and coaching such a meaningful and fun way to get back involved in the sport that you love. So I think a great message for whether it's high school coaches or young people thinking about getting into coaching. There's lots of opportunity out there. You just gotta kind of be willing to work hard and do all the same things you did as a player, just with a little bit of a different role. So I brought you on today, to kind of give us some perspective on what you guys are doing on the back end. You mentioned you got your career started with coaching defensive backs before you're a defensive coordinator. So you mentioned to me you're a big quarters team. What does quarters coverage kind of give you guys as a defense, and why do you choose to use that as a key concept in your secondary?
For us, when I started in the league, we had every team had a very, very, very good quarterback. In Can West, passing is a huge part of the game. Most teams are pass first, pass heavy. So we knew that we needed to stop verticals. We couldn't give up big plays. We really wanted to have a team try to nickel and dime us down the field, and hopefully they make a mistake. At that point, Theo Gizar was at U of M, and he was absolutely chucking the ball. He was the guy that went vertical, and they had some very, very good receivers. And it seemed every team had vertical threats. So we thought we needed a defense that could stop forwards, and that's really what we wanted to do. We wanted to play a defense where we had good vision on receivers, also good vision on the quarterback, because we feel like although the quarterbacks are very, very good and they've got very strong arms, they don't look off as much as you see at the pro level. So we wanted to start reading receivers and start taking a look at the quarterback so that we can start reading those, especially in the low zones. We can take advantage of some keys from the quarterback that we got through film. So kind of all started trying to stop those vertical threats, and then it kind of developed into a nice low zone spot drop mentality for us, where now we're going to defend spots on the field and try to take away quarterbacks' looks.
Yeah, and it's so important, I think, especially in three down football, right? You see so many touchdown drives are really based around big plays, and that's something that I've noticed working on the other side of the ball is, it's always great to take what the defense has given you, but if you got to do that 8 times in a row, that's a lot of good execution, like you said, without making a mistake. And if you can get teams one incompletion in your 2nd and 10 or incompletion on 2nd down, you're off the field. So I know you got some film for us, and I'll let you get to that.
This is our cold coverage, quarter coverage. This is a base quarter coverage for us. Essentially, when we're looking at this, we kind of show who our deep quarter players are, and as I mentioned before, we're a spot drop team. So our corner, we just call him corner to the field. He's going to spot drop to the deep number, so he's going to be in this general area. On the other side, our boundary, who's our boundary corner, is going to drop to the boundary number. So those are our 2 of our 4 deeps. Our free safety is going to be a field hash defender, we call him, and our hawk is going to be a boundary hash defender. So those are our deep quarter coverages. From there, we always want to have those guys read. We're a receiver read team, so they're going to have specific reads, and we just call it page 36 of our playbook, and that's very, very important for our DBs to kind of recognize, to understand what their reads are. So I'll go through those because we feel those are very important. Our corner, for example, we just call this guy S1, so we want to read him to S2. And then this is really the only guy that's got a 3-man read to S3, just because we see so much spread. We see a lot of, we just call this 32. We see a lot of 32. So the corner is going to read S1, S2 to S3. Now, his reads are progressive, right? If S1 goes vertical, his read stops. That's his read. That's where he's going to go. If S1 does a dynamic in or sits on the sideline, he's going to go to S2. If S2 goes vertical, that's his read. S2 goes dynamic in or does a curl, his read is going to go to the S3 flag because we see that quite a bit. The free safety in this case is going to be reading S2 to S3, and then if there's a W3, right, if it's 23, then he'll read that W3. So he'll go S2 to S3 if it's 32, and he'll go S2 to W3 if it's 23. Those are his reads, and those are vertical threat reads. So he's just going to read to see if those guys are vertical threats. On the boundary side, our boundary is going to read W1 to W2, and our hawk is going to read W2 back to S3. And that's a big read for us because if they do try to run a diagonal or a post, and W2 kind of sits, which we see quite a bit, where W2 will just do a dynamic out, he can play that S3. And in RPO, we get that quite a bit where this guy will just drag across and this guy will block or sit, and they'll do the RPO read to the field side. And we've had a lot of success with that hawk robbing that S3 on the field side in that case. Our base low zone, we're assuming in this case that we're sending 4. All right, so essentially one of these 4 guys are blitzing, so it's kind of a zone. And what we really love about quarters also is it's interchangeable. It doesn't really matter who blitzes, it's who's filling that zone, right? So our low zones are simply boundary number, so that's this guy, in this case the Will. Then we have a boundary 3-0. So what that means is this guy's going to drop 3 yards outside of the boundary hash. We have a mid dropper and a field 3-0. So the field 3-0. In this case, we're blitzing, say, a Zach or a Mac. Again, that's kind of what we call these guys. This is our Falcon. That's our field side half. Our Hawk, we call him the boundary side half. Our Sam, Zach is our inside linebacker to the field, Mac, and Will. All right, so that's kind of where we're dropping. And again, like I said, these are our spot drops. And essentially, we're reading low zones to kind of feel what's pushing us outside. All right, so this guy right here, he'll be reading S2, right? If S2 does an out, he'll expand with him. All right, then he'll read S1. If he does a curl, he'll be underneath of it. And then he'll read back, if those guys go vertical, S3 on and out. So he's going to expand or widen his zone if there's an outside threat to his side. The Sam, the middle read, he's going to read S3 to W2. He's going to read his 2 S3 to W2, and then back to S2. If S3 does a dynamic out, he'll read that S. So he's really, what we like to call it is we read the new 3. All right, so if S3 goes out, S2 comes back in, he's the new 3, or the new S3. That's how we define that. On the boundary, again, 3-0 is very similar. He's reading the W2 to the S3, or the new 2 and new 3. And then the will, in this case, doing the number drop, is going to be reading W2 to W1. That's our read. Now, a couple things we can do out of this, right? If we want to just rush 3, right? If we just want to rush 3 and we drop 4 deep and 5 under, we just expand this so that we have a field number defender. So we'll just have a field number. Quite often we feel it's kind of a waste of time trying to defend the field number because the throw's so long. We can always rally to that with our 3-0 defender. So if we are going to rush 3, quite often with an inside linebacker, we may spy the quarterback if he's a good running quarterback. We might spy the back if they like to release the back out at times. He's a big threat in the passing game. That's kind of where we are in terms of our spots and our drops and our reads. For us, we preach the reads because that's gonna teach our eyes. And when we're talking about the backfield, we're always reading with our eyes first. We definitely want to look at those threats and read with our eyes. Right? Your eyes come before anything else.
Yeah, that's so important. And I know more from my experience coaching the high school kids that I coach, when you can get them understanding. And one thing I like about the system you're describing is, like you said, you're obviously going to have your tweaks and your formational adjustments and different ways to bring that fourth guy like you were talking about. But when you have these landmarks, it's easy to just interchange. Okay, you're going to be the new, the new 3-0 player or the new middle player or the new boundary number player. I think that allows, that simplicity allows you to be creative and not cause confusion with your own guys.
Yeah, and if you watched us play, we're a heavy pressure team. We'll pressure 4, we'll pressure 5, but we'll try to give a ton of different looks in our pressure, and that just allows us, right? If we're blitzing with Zach, we know we're going to make that up. We're blitzing with Sam, we know we'll make that up in the back end by dropping somebody else. One thing also we love about this look, and I know there's been lots of talk this COVID season about add-ins. If we get an add-in by W2, we know that if we add in a high zone defender, we're still a 3DP, which is awesome because now we have enough vertical defenders to defend their 4 vertical routes. All right. So one thing we love to talk about is if W2 does add in, the Hawk can easily add in with him, so we're not outnumbered in the box. And instead of being a 4 deep team, we now transition to a 3 deep team, which is great for us because now we have 4 vertical threats, and we know that we can play 1-over-1, very strong on that because we have a vertical threat with a low zone defender over top, and we can split the 3 vertical threats from the field. So we feel very, very, very strong in that. It allows us to transition from a 4 deep to a 3 deep with a loss of vertical threats, and that's one thing that we see a lot of recently. UBC does a lot of add-ins. Calgary does a lot of add-ins, so we know that we stay in our base 4, we can transition to a 3 just like that, and there's no loss of responsibility. There's really just a inability for them to outnumber us in the box.
Yeah, and those having those rules, and that's always something as an offensive guy when you're looking at, okay, how are they covering down different formations, is that element of, defending motion. Like we were kind of talking about this before, but defending motion becomes so challenging, when you're trying to stay solid on the verticals and, get guys in the gaps they need to get to. And I think this just being the first time I'm looking at how you guys are doing it, that simplicity is incredibly valuable in terms of letting your guys play fast.
Right, and then what we see quite a bit too is that jet motion. So we get that jet. Now it's an easy transition also where the Hawk slides over and we can activate that free safety of the high zone defender and just take that away right away, even if it's a jet or if he's going to slice out on a slice route or whatever out here. We feel very strong in our vertical coverage, but we're also taking away their primary receiver in that case, which is the slice route here. So it makes sense to us for sure, just because we can transition in and out of it very, very, very easily. We'll kind of take a look at a couple clips, unless you have any more questions.
Oh no, that's awesome. Actually, I guess if you get two back, obviously in I guess it depends. Let's talk 22.
Right.
All your landmarks stay the same. I'd imagine it's just you don't now. There's no S3 to worry about for the field corner.
Right. Our reads become simpler, and our vertical threats become a little bit simpler. We're just way more aggressive. What we like to do in that case, because we have no diagonal threat to the field, what we'll do is we'll slim this down and almost run a read on this side. Where if this guy, we'll kind of read W2, and if he just does an immediate dynamic out, we'll just sit with our boundary and roll over top with our hawk. Right. It just makes our life a little bit easier. Because we have no threat from the field. Because if this guy comes, we're just going to lock that up there. Right? If that kind of makes sense. So as they eliminate vertical threats, our life becomes a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we actually prefer less vertical threats, especially in the back end. And in our conference, it's kind of back end first, and then we try to take care of the front end. Is that good?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So we'll just look at a couple clips here. If you have any questions about the front, go ahead and ask. I know you're interested in learning a little bit more about the three front, so if you have any questions about things we're doing in the front, go ahead and ask. But this is just our cold coverage. All right, so we'll talk about our next coverage a little bit later, but we like to play a lot with the free safety quite a bit, make him kind of look like he's coming down, just to give it a different type of look. But you can see we just have our 4 verts. From there, since play action on 1st and 10, so it kind of holds our linebackers. The beautiful thing about this is now they don't have to try to find men, right, to drop to. They're going to drop to spots. You can see our Zach linebacker, this guy right here, is going to be dropping to this boundary 3-0, which is right about there. So he kind of gets his head around, drops to the spot, and it ends up hitting him right in the hands, which is obviously our goal, right? The fact that he is going to drop in, right, on the play action, quarterbacks kind of throw into a spot. We just happen to occupy that spot, so we're in pretty good shape there.
It's one of those things where a lot of my influences have been more, like spot dropping hasn't been as big a part of, what I've been doing. But I remember back in high school, one of my good friends was our middle linebacker, and he always just said it's so much simpler this way. Because if I end up buying the play action, I don't have to find number 3, or I don't have to find, I know if I go to my spot and I get action in that area, now I can get my eyes on the quarterback and like you see here, focus on trying to take the ball away, not just find that next receiver.
Right, for sure. And we do change it up. Like if we run thirds, we are a man drop team. So I've done a presentation actually on the 3 phases football on our thirds, which is man drop. So if anybody's interested on that, I suggest you check that out. It's on 3 phases football. You can kind of just do a search on YouTube. But kind of wanted to talk quarters where now it's spot, now it's less onerous. And that's why we like to run it on first down, because if they do add in, we can add in with. And if it is play action, which we see a lot of RPO, obviously, in Can West, which we call CFL Light, so it makes our drops a little bit easier if it is play action. Sure. Yeah, again, any questions you have in the front, go ahead and ask. I know we don't want to spend a bunch of time talking quarters, but this is just a 4-man pressure. We're just setting the MAC. So if the MAC goes, the Zach is going to replace his drop. So that's.
And you guys, if I'm remembering correctly, you guys are based out of a 30 as well?
Right, yeah. So you can kind of see our rush, our field side guy rush, our nose, our end, then our Zach and our back. We can see we're a pretty spread 30, which is a little bit different than I know you had Coach Barry on, where they're more of a tight front. We're more of a spread front, where these guys are going to apex all the time, and they're both kind of box active, where we can have a 7-man box with very easily.
What are their reads as the 2 outside guys there, your Sam and Will? Obviously, they're reading
the tackle.
Yep.
to the back, and then to, to W2, and this guy's going to read the tackle to the back to S3, especially in zone, because we can easily have these guys added into the box to be a little bit stronger on the run.
So if like let's say here they're running play action, but if 72 stepped out at that defensive end, which gap is the will assigned to then? Is the end going to rip into the B, or does the linebacker have to fold in?
Right, in this particular one, we just call this SPA, which is kind of an option blitz for us. He'd be in this B gap. He'd be in this A. We're going to be knifing here, and he would have this C gap. So if this guy does step out, he's going to slip inside, and he's going to fit the C gap. But we always want to defend C's from space, right? We will always late defend that, because if they want to bump it out, we can late defend that pretty strong there.
That was something that I had, we hadn't seen, I think, a ton, and I think we're going to start to see some in the OUA more of that on defense. I hadn't seen very much of that at all until last year, and now I'm like deep diving on it, because as an offensive guy, I'm like, that's a problem. I would rather them not do that. So yeah, I'm desperately trying to learn as much as I can, because a lot of our basic RPO, or even just how we're trying to block our zone concepts and what we're trying to do in the doubles and that it is far simpler if we're able to line those doubles up and get vertical.
Yeah, and that's why we like it. And we see a lot of backer read where they're going to read the backer, especially now that we have so many ends just going into the B gaps. We're playing the 4 eyes. So that's why we like being in space, because it's tougher read, right? If that guy's in the box, it's a lot easier read to get to throw it 100%. To the slot receiver when that guy is tight in the box. But when he's playing with when we're a little bit tougher to defend.
And even just in your zone coverage distributions, like that was the one thing last summer, the team that won the league we play in was a great, they're a very balanced team, but they could really, spread the ball to multiple receivers, and, we couldn't bracket guys or try and match guys up as well. We needed to have really good leverage, and that's kind of where I started looking into it. And, when you're able to, like you see the picture here, if you're the quarterback, you're looking at a lot of guys that look pretty covered down, but you're still sound in the box, which I think is if you're an offensive play caller or a quarterback, you're kind of used to seeing one of two pitchers. I either see space on the outside or I see space on the inside, whereas, it's those lines are a little less black and white than they used to be.
Yeah, that's ideally try to make offenses work a little harder. They got an easy job as it is, so we try to give them a little bit more work. But you see this one is just a vertical S2. You just go in vertical. Ideally, that's what we get, right? They want to throw vertical. They have to throw it over top of a lot of deep zone guys.
So what are your coaching points, I guess? So the linebackers, you've been really clear on that, and I think I'm always impressed when guys can come on and if I can understand it in 10 minutes, you probably can get your kids to get it in 10 minutes.
Right.
So that's awesome. I think you've been really clear on the teaching there. In terms of like the physical cues for the linebackers, so we see these guys dropping, basically they're landmarks. They seem to be right where, you had them drawn up. In terms of once they get there, what are you teaching them in terms of how are they finding the threat to their zone, or how are they looking back at the quarterback to try and navigate where they're at that point?
Right, and you can kind of see an example here where our low zones change a little bit because they bring in this slot receiver. So now instead of going right to a mid with this guy, he's going to widen out just a little bit because he knows this is his threat. So once he gets to that threat, right, now you're going to kind of get eyes back to the cue. And what we want to do is we kind of feel a box out, like we're boxing that guy out. So if he does want to run that deep dig, we're going to kind of ride it inside and almost play kind of a modified man, that if he wants to go inside, we're going to essentially not turn him or man turn him and get face up on him. We want to kind of box him out and kind of ride him inside so we can kind of play the man and still have eyes on the quarterback. So that's kind of his read. So you can kind of see him open his left foot here. And if this guy would have continued on, he would just kind of ride him inside to kind of roll that. You can kind of see it with 52, the Will backer down here. He kind of gets that 80, 88, and then he's going to ride that back inside. Mm-hmm. See his reads as they extend. He's going to read the quarterback. Quarterback rolls away. He now knows that this sideline route is not optional for the quarterback, so now he's going to turn. And if we get roll out, we tell our guys just to initially slide their zones to the roll and get that vertical threat. Kind of see the front a little bit. We just call this our back twist. This is something that I talked about with Coach Waterman on the All-24, the twist look.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna be getting in trouble from all the offensive guys I know. Too much 30 content. We're trying to suppress that movement on the offensive side of the ball. We're big fans of the 4-3 over front. I think most offensive coaches are pretty good if you're gonna live in that. So my my advice to the offensive guys is you better get learning this stuff on defense because it's coming. I think, especially obviously I do my coaching in the OUA, but even at the high school level, and there's a lot of guys running 30 in the OUA too. But when I look at, again, trying to defend this spread stuff, and I think there's probably a lot of high school coaches, and I know in summer football this is true as well, more and more teams are spread. More and more teams have not just competent quarterbacks, but good athletic guys who can really throw the ball. I remember when I was playing high school football, we had one kid in the league who was pretty good, and everyone else would run the ball. I go back and watch that same league now, and there's 3 or 4 kids that throw on the football, and so finding these answers to spread offense, I think, is huge.
Yeah, for sure, and that's kind of what we primarily see through front in the Canada West now. There's only really Manitoba's the only team that runs that kind of sticks in their 4, and they feel comfortable with 4 because they're a match in the back end, right? So if they're a match in the back end, it never really changes, so they can afford to run that 4. And they've always had such good D linemen. I think they've been pretty fortunate to have some dudes on that D line. So again, just a Zach twist with our quarters. Let's see, we're forcing it, and you see as the roll comes, this 3-0 defender will extend out with the roll to try to get to the sideline. So that's just one way of looking at when we see roll, we're just going to push out of the zones from there. Exact twist. This exact clip was on the All-24, but in that pressure, end up getting a hold call there.
That's one of those things too. Like you get, you're bringing that 4th rusher from depth. I mean, I played offensive line, and it's a whole lot easier when 4 guys put their hands in the dirt. I'm quite confident saying that because you're not, at that point you can just go play. You know who's coming. Okay, we got maybe 2 or 3 other guys that can blitz that we got to deal with. Whereas when you're in a 30, it just makes so that's a whole other level that you got to be cognizant of and where that 4th rusher comes from.
Right. This is just an example of, they have 2 backs, right? This is 22 against Alberta. So on the front end, this side they'd be running read because there's no vertical threat here anymore. This guy's a low zone defender, so he's in pretty good shape. He sees the vertical, now he just releases it. And that's another thing I didn't make a point of. Quite often in cover 3s, we want to reroute vertical defenders, which gets us a little slower to our drops, right? So if we're a low zone defender, we want to really get hands on and kind of disrupt those verticals. But now that we know that we have 4 vertical defenders, we don't need to lay hands on those guys. We can kind of let them go, and then that just cleans us up a little bit faster to play these short throws, right? So now we get this short throw, now we can rally up and tackle it. We're in pretty good shape.
Now I'm not sure if it would be a different call for you guys, but with your quarters, do you have, different variations on, okay, who are those 4 vertical guys, or do you just try and move those? Like, for example, in the drawing you showed us, you had your boundary, I think you called it the hawk in the boundary, and then your free safety in your corner. Oh, here you go. I'm getting ahead of the presentation.
That's fine. That's fine. For sure. Yeah, we essentially in our mindset, we'll talk the corner, the falcon, the free safety, the SAM, the boundary, the hawk, and the will. We feel comfortable sending any 4 of those guys deep. So we'll have combinations of any 4 of those guys going deep, and we'll add those as we see teams try to beat us, right? So we run Colt, and we know in Colt what they're trying to do is they're just trying to sit and sit, right? So quite often you'll get these double curls, all right, and then they'll kind of play that Falcon and kind of try to work him in space in that 3-0 in the Colt where he goes here, they throw to the other guy, right? Mm-hmm. So what we try to do is we try to change it up. So I'll give you one variation of it. Obviously, there's a ton. We call this Beretta, where now the free safety and the Falcon essentially exchange responsibility, right? So the free safety, and we let him play with it, right? Because if he's going to look high, and he'll kind of throw here, where if they want to throw that deep curl, we see that quite a bit. This guy will be, because there's so much space out here, we see this deep curl to S2. Now the free safety can kind of show it and then try to rob that or undercut it. So we have quite a few variations. This is one variation for us in which the free safety and the Falcon exchange responsibility. And we just call it Beretta. Our naming concept for quarters is always guns or guns. So Colt, Beretta, we'll run a pistol, a revolver, a Wesson, Smith. We have different variations, and they kind of fall under the same category where they're all types of handgun. So that's kind of how we name our coverage, and have a naming family in that regard. So in this one, so in this one, we're just exchanging the free safety and the Falcon.
It becomes tough, especially I think one of the interesting things that more and more teams are doing, at least in the conference I'm in, is you're getting guys with option routes. So they're trying to take advantage of, whether it's pre-snap leverage or as they run the route. And by changing up, who's vertical in the quarters, you can really make that life a little bit harder on guys, right? They're used to, the F being that 3-0 player to the field. Now all of a sudden he's bailing out. That guy thinks he can just run the curl, and the free safety's driving all over it. I think that's a huge advantage if you can. What I really like, and again, I hadn't seen a ton about your system before you came on, but for your players, the consistency and if we're playing like you said our quarters package, we can have all these different variations, but we're gonna drop to these spots, and we just got to know who's going where and what concept. That's a recipe I think for guys to play fast, and when you're defending as much spread pass game as you guys are getting, that's hugely valuable on defense.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what our philosophy is. We want to be able to obviously play as fast as possible, because the offenses are trying to speed up the game, right? And they'll go hurry up, and we simply have a call where now it's just an exchange of responsibilities where they should have an understanding of what other guys are doing. In this case, it's just the 4 verts, the 4 under. Then we'll, like I said, we'll assign who's going. We look at a little bit of Beretta here. Yeah. So one thing we also like to keep as simple as possible, and I'll just touch on it very briefly, is we always, always, always tell our defensive line where to go. We never want them thinking, reading. We'll always tell. I know you had Coach Barry on, and he said the nose always back doors, right? So in their tight front, he's always going to back door. We always tell our nose and our D-line where to go. We always want, because we're blitzing a little bit more out of our 3 front. We never want the nose doing a whole bunch of reading. So in snake, for example, he'd be going strong. So he's just going to go strong in this case. So it makes it a little bit easier for us. So in the Beretta, we can kind of see our free safety playing a little bit of games here, kind of back down, and then he kind of robs that 3-0. Right? From there, it's a good example of our guy actually going in the wrong direction. So this is late in the game against UBC. We had some young bucks in there, pretty excited. This is a good example of a young player that was supposed to go to the 3-0, decided not to go to the 3-0. So late in the game here, he kind of makes a bit of a mistake. But you can see our vertical threats drive us to this, though, right? So this guy's reading W2 to S3. As soon as you see that butt on S3, right, he's no longer a threat across his face. he can drive on that. So that allows us to drive verticals, not just kind of sit and wait in vertical zones and wait for something to appear. As soon as his threat sits, and then he goes to his next read, which is S3. As soon as he sees a butt away, right, now he can drive that threat. Right? It would be ideal if this guy went in the right spot, and we'd have an under and an over. But because he can drive it, he kind of gets there just slightly after the ball and knocks it loose, right? So we get that ability to drive those intermediate routes, right? Those 15-yard digs that are really, really, really tough to defend. Really, because they're kind of over top the low zone defenders and underneath the high zone defenders, really gives us a lot of trouble. So this allows us to drive them if we have no vertical threat from our secondary reads.
Yeah, that confidence is huge, and I think a lot of it comes down to the teaching, and that's why like I was saying, I was enjoying you going through your landmarks there and exactly where guys are going to, because I think a lot of times, whether you're watching film or you're watching a clinic, it's like, yeah, we're playing 4 over, 4 underneath, we're dropping this guy here, but it's how you can create that sense of confidence for your players, and I think, at least for me, I know my guys are playing fast when they're asking me a lot of questions that are, hey, we saw this, like, what's, where, how should we have played that? Because then they're recognizing what's going on in front of them, right? They're not thinking out about what their job was supposed to be. It's not, hey, was I supposed to be the 3-0 or the middle player there, right? It was asking actual questions about what they're seeing. And from what I'm seeing on tape, guys are flying around. And like you said there, you might not get perfect execution, from a younger player there, but your rules in the system allow you to be aggressive, and ultimately that's the key on defense.
Right, and consistency in terminology is very important too, we find. That way the halfback's not coming off and saying, slot back did this. Well, no, the W2 did this and the S3 did this. Now we're consistent messaging where now we can really use the same vernacular and talk about threats and try to get things cleaned up as fast as possible on the sideline, because it is, as you know, the sideline of a youth sport game can be pretty chaotic with how quick change is and how you're trying to make decisions and changes as quick as possible.
I'm the son of a defensive coordinator, so I know full well the stress of you give up a score. It's like, man, every time we give up a score, and we don't give, I've been fortunate working at Laurier, our defense gets a lot of stops for us. We don't have to get in this situation too much, but if we ever give up a score, I'm always thinking, man, don't go 3 and out. Just if we can get, and having that efficiency is so important. Like you said, solving problems. And anytime when I'm watching film, and I think a lot of people play quarters, and I think it's something that, partially because it's coming up for the American game, partially because it's become so common, in the U sport level. But I talk to my high school coach buddies, they're always, worried about giving up stuff underneath. And I'm always going, man, at the university level, like, we're not even that worried. If they want to throw the ball to the field numbers, like, we'll figure that out after, And I think it's one of those things where the way you've presented it, you're underneath players, even though sure there's only 4 of them where there might be 5 in your cover 3, they're able to see the quarterback and identify where the ball's going and then get to the area that they're actually needed to defend. Whereas, I think a lot of times if they don't have that confidence in what they're doing, and you're not using things like naming conventions and keeping your rules succinct, you can slow your guys down that way. It's a great look at exactly how you guys are doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of our motto, is we want to be simple and play fast, right? So that's kind of our end goal. Our kind of our end goal is to get as much pressure as possible, but still play solid fundamental coverage in the back end. Because if you're just going to be a 0 team and send the house every time, there's always a possibility that some bad things can happen in the back end. It just takes one breakdown, for sure. You can see, and there's certain blitzes that we keep consistent. Like, we run a lot of Sam Charlie, right, where the Sam is blitzing C, and we'll play that Beretta behind it. Just in the back end, we feel a little bit more comfortable with it. He does a good job of feeding that in. At that point, we get a breakdown. Now we're just working, and trying as much as possible to get to threats. That's kind of our scramble rule. grab a man, and we got secondary contain coming from depth in that case. Yeah. So same idea. Again, we get the Sam Charlie, low zone defenders, right?
And especially when, I think when the quarterback can see the defender's eyes, it creates some hesitation as well, right? Like he knows that guy's not just going to stay where he's at when the ball comes out because he's able to make a read, make a break on the ball.
Right. That's we want as many eyes in good spaces as possible, for sure. And we got a low zone. We got two verticals from the field. So we got two verticals. We got two vertical defenders over top, plus a low zone defender. So if they want to leak somebody out, really we got an extra set of eyes that can be looking, right? So if he's not trying to carry that vertical, right, because quite often this low zone defender, we're just playing cuts or three high. A low zone defender will have to carry the vertical. And now we got that low zone defender that doesn't have to carry a vertical. Now he has eyes in the backfield, and he gets a great tackle on 2nd and 10 for a 1-yard gain. Just because we have eyes in the backfield, we can see backs check release. We can see any possibility of screen. We can see all the things that are happening in the backfield because we have so many eyes looking at the backfield, checking threats, looking at situations like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess my last question would just be, so obviously like any zone coverage, you're like you said at the start, you're using those landmarks. If teams start to, really be able to throw the ball outside of those, so get the ball to the field flat. I know that's sometimes, a bit of a weakness in chorus coverage, or I guess depending on the team, some teams the weak flat might be in the boundary. Do you what else are you? And I'm not expecting you to have any film on it, but what other coverages are you carrying to try and I guess once teams start to take advantage, because the looks I'm seeing, the verticals aren't there. I'm sure a lot of teams are starting to quick game you and try and get the ball out, like you said with the CFL light. What else are you guys kind of carrying in your package to be a little heavier on the underneath stuff?
So we're like I said, we do run a lot of thirds also. If a team wants to go base, so the fullback will run more thirds. If they want to kind of nickel and dime us or try to curl us down, we'll run the thirds. And like I said, with our thirds, we'll be a lot more aggressive on the low zones. We'll reroute those guys. It kind of takes away the quick game a little bit more. So we'll really try to be physical with the low zone because we don't want guys running releasing deep because we don't have enough vertical defenders to defend that. So we'll run that. A lot of thirds where we're man dropping, so we'll reroute and then we'll drop inside the next man. So we always are underneath curls all the time. So we'll run that. We also love a lot of different combination coverages. So we'll box the side and man aside. So we'll, if they want to try to take and beat us on the boundary, and we see that quite a bit, where teams will just try to nickel dime you on the boundary with these double curls because it's tough for this guy to defend two. So what we'll do there is we'll just be low and play a single high man, or we'll be low with our hawk and our boundary and roll our free safety over there and roll our Sam deep. Where we can be low zone, and really beat the crap out of those guys and have a free safety roll over top just in case one slips free. We like to do that. Also, quite often with teams, if there's a guy that they're trying to beat us with, and it's quite often this guy where he'll run that deep curl, and just because there's so much space, we'll simply just take our Falcon and just lock him up. Well, you're out of the coverage. We're going to run a 3 deep, 4 under, and you're just locked up. We'll just man that guy right up, and we'll just try to isolate them. So within our base frame coverage, in our terminology, we have the ability to man him, man S2, S3, W1, or W2 on any play. So we might call it an eliminate or a lock or an isolate, where that's the guy that we are going to simply just man up and zone around. right? So if that's the guy that they're trying to beat us with, we have the ability to try to take that guy away.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it, Coach. It's a really thorough breakdown, and I think anytime you get that deep into the rules, it really helps people then go teach it. So really appreciate it, and all the best as we continue to recruit, and hopefully we're all coaching sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no doubt. Hopefully we're on the field very shortly.